talking about testing and release strategy for native apps. And quickly about myself, Anand Bagmar, been in the testing or rather quality space of software for about 20 years now. Worked in various different product and services organizations, various different domains, and that's enough about me. Okay. Today I will be sharing some of my experiences of what I went through on a particular product that I was working on, and hopefully I'll be able to make it relatable to what you've been doing as well. Before we get started, a quick show of hands. I would like to understand the different roles that you are playing on the teams that you are working with today. So let's talk about a little bit about what web and native apps are very quickly, right? And this is going to be more about you driving the session than me driving it, okay? I'm a lazy person. I like to ask questions and get more answers. And so I will play it in that fashion, okay? So first of all, what are the similarities between web and native apps testing? Both have user interfaces to deal with, yes. What else? Backend remains the same, good point. Anything else? Sorry? User friendly. What do you mean by that? Both have user experience that you need to think about, right? Now, what is the user experience really going to be? I guess that's what you mean by that, right? Okay. Security, who said that? Yeah, security, great. Security, so NFRs basically, right? Web or native apps would have NFRs to think about. What else? Anything else? I think that sort of sums it up in that sense, right? In a nutshell, thinking about, if I just say web or native apps, you would sort of think about those sort of aspects. Okay. What are the differences in testing either of these? Sorry? Performance and memory management. So performance was there in similarities. Why is it then differences as well? And why would memory management be different for web versus this? In web also, the browser can just eat up resources, right? Web application won't necessarily crash your app unless it freezes the browser and then you have to kill it. So, but yes, that is one of the differences, which is less seen on web apps compared to native apps that are there. Apps becoming unresponsive. What else? Sorry? Resolutions. Okay, what about resolutions? Native apps have to support many resolutions because screen sizes might be different. Well, but I didn't say web app was a web app or a mobile web app. It could, there's still some similarities in that, but native apps, of course, have to think more about that, right? You're right. What else? How? How they get installed versus upgrade, that kind of situation, right? Very true. Good point. Device specific. So is my app supported for a specific OS type version or above kind of things, right? Yes. Handle interruptions, very important. Well, again, mobile web also, but then there's a difference between that. So yes, interruptions. Multiple versions of the front end. So you mean 5 different devices of different types interacting with this, right? Okay, and that's actually a very important point as well, right? And we'll get to, we'll talk more about that a little bit. So yes, I think we've sort of, again, we are thinking in the right direction in terms of what the differences are, right? Devices, so form factors might be different, the resolutions, what are you seeing it in landscape versus portrait, and if you're keeping on switching in between, what happens to the app in that case. We spoke about memory management and performance, right? I wanted to get a little bit more deeper in that aspect, what it means. In case of native apps, you have to think about the device hardware capabilities and how the app is going to interact with that, which is much more stringent, many more varieties in that aspect, depending on the nature of the app itself. what hardware features it might be using or not. And as a result, there is more complexity involved in testing the native apps as well. And of course, the OS dependencies that we saw. Okay? So again, from web versus native perspective, I think we've got it sorted out. We understand the similarities and differences, what it really means around that. Okay? Let's talk about the next thing. Let's say the app is developed and tested, and now you need to release it, right? So what are the similarities when it comes to releasing web versus native apps? Web and native apps for that matter. What aspects are same? Anyone works on the release side of things as well, or do we just focus on development and testing? Build is still the same, okay? That's one similarity, yes? We're talking similarities, not differences. Hold that thought. You're right. You've seen the slides probably somehow, I don't know. Yeah, similarities, what else is similar? Different environments, what about environments? So how is that similar for native apps? So for web or MWeb, there will be QA environments, stage environments, whatever different environments are there. But for native also, you would have similar types of things? Okay. Yeah. Correct. So there will be concept of environments. You're right, right? So there's an internal build that is which is pointing to internal backend systems in order to allow you to test it completely, right? So that again becomes similar. So what that really means is these are configurations for the apps, right? Or whether it's web, MWeb, or native apps, you need some environment configurations to say, okay, what am I really talking to? Which backend systems, databases, APIs, or assets that I'm pulling it from my presentation layer or any other aspects. You need to configure that aspect, and that again remains the same. And as you move from dev to QA to stage to pre-prod to prod or whatever hundreds of environments you might have, you would have these similar across these types of products. Test cases, potentially. Again, we spoke about the testing strategy of it, right? There are a lot of differences as well. Business test cases remain the same. In various cases, yes, that is true. Okay. The other aspects that potentially remain the same is in terms of other types of activities from a management of release perspective, right? We spoke configurations, but also A/B testing could be another aspect, which again remains the same for web versus web and native apps as well. So these are similarities again. So good, we are again thinking in the right direction over there. So now what are the differences? One answer you said in terms of you have to upload the build in case of native apps. In iOS, you have to upload it to App Store. In Google, you have to upload it to Play Store. In certain cases, for various reasons, you might not be using these distribution mechanisms. You would have your own distribution mechanism, right? For various reasons that maybe your app is not qualified to be put on the rule, based on the rules of Google Play Store or App Store. So you would have your own distribution mechanism how to do that. So yes, the upload process is different. But that is again going to be same for web versus native apps, right? Because you need to have a build process to do that. So that is same. Of course, each type of product would have its own quirks around it, right? So that I would put it under the similar aspects in that sense. Correct, but so might be the case for I want to support a different type of browser versus for MWeb, I've got a different build process. Assets might be different, right? So it's all about configuration, and building process remains the same essentially, right? Based on the configurations, I'm going to generate the artifact and do that. The deployment is definitely different because I can take a binary that is created for web app, put it in my web server, and I'm done. But for native apps, I get a APK or a IP and I have to upload it somewhere for it to be used by someone else, right? That aspect is different for sure, okay? Sorry? For App Store, you have to submit the build, and Apple goes through its own review of the build, and then within 24 hours to 7 days is when you can expect a response. In Google Play Store, in most cases, within an hour or so, you can get the approval from Google and say, okay, you're ready to approve, release this build. Also, in case of, in both these cases, you have to manually submit the version number, the code number, whatever other details of the artifact might be in order to publish the build. In case of web, it's completely up to you, in your control, how you can deploy it automatically, right? So that's again the difference that is there, okay? Also the concept of beta release versus real release, I think in native apps, it is more easier to manage that. If you have to do a beta release of your website, then again, I've not really heard of beta testing for web-based product, more of A/B testing than beta testing in that sense, right? So some differences around there. Okay, so let's look at another aspect. How does CI/CD really work for web apps versus native apps? We spoke about the testing, we spoke about the releases. We spoke about certain aspects of CI/CD already, right? In case of web, you can automatically set up pipelines to do your release in a certain environment or right up to production as well. But for native, it will definitely stop up to a certain, at a certain stage. You can create these artifacts for different environments automatically, but you may not really be able to release it automatically, okay? So that is one major difference. You are absolutely spot on. A native app is like a virus once released. You have no control over the adoption of it. It is out there. It depends on the user, what the user wants to get it or not. By default, it is auto updates over Wi-Fi. The first thing I do when I get a phone is I make sure auto updates is switched off, because I want control of when I want to update the apps, right? Whereas a web-based product, once it is out there, the next time the user comes to that particular site, that particular page, the user is going to get the new functionality. A/B testing can control certain aspects of it, but what this really means is you can release with more confidence, with much more authority on web apps. Find a problem, do a hotfix, the next time the user comes in, the problem is fixed. For native apps, it is not really the case. I release a bad quality product, and I potentially have lost the user forever. Because the user will say, what a crappy app, it crashed the minute I opened it. And I am just going to uninstall it, never going to come back to it again, because I've got a lot of other options, right? So it's very important to think more deeply about native apps. What is the impact really going to be? Is it going to work for all my users in fresh install cases and upgrade situations? How is my data going to be managed? What type of new features are going to be there or not? It is very, very thorough testing and thought process required on this aspect, okay? Now, I'll give you a very different example of what I go through with one of the native apps that I use. I've got an old phone, old relative compared to the pace at which new phones get released and how we switch phones, right? So I've got a 4-year-old phone. I use Ola app quite a bit. You know the way I get to know when I book a cab, if it has been booked or not? The app crashes for me. The minute the booking gets confirmed, the app crashes. I get a notification the app has crashed. Do I want to relaunch it? I know my booking is confirmed. I relaunch it, I get to see the cab details. I don't have to wait for the booking details to come up on the screen over there. I've got a special notification, okay? Now, I need Ola because I need to move around a lot. I travel quite a bit of late. I need it. I cannot just say, oh, this app keeps crashing, I'm going to just uninstall it. So it really depends on what the impact is going to be, okay? So just to summarize what we've discussed so far, we sort of understand the similarities, differences in web and native app testing, release process, and what CI/CD really means from this context, right? We can do everything for native apps from a CI/CD perspective up to the point of uploading it to Play Store, App Store from the distribution mechanism. Everything else still remains the same as a web app can, okay? You just have to do a little bit more work from native apps perspective to get all your other types of tests automated and run automatically as part of the pipelines, but it works well. So with that understanding, let me take you through a journey of a product that I have worked on and how we managed to solve some of these challenges. especially based on the constraints that we had in the ecosystem at that particular point in time. So this was an entertainment video streaming product catered to a few regions, 4 or 5 different regions in Southeast Asia, and it had a lot of users using that product. So 10 plus active users, 10 plus million active users on that product in these regions. The unique device OS combinations that we had was more than 13,000. Of course, Android contributes a large to the 99% probably to that number, right? 99.5% to that number probably. The releases have to be frequent because we don't want to wait for 3 months to do a release and get new features out in front of the users. In many cases, just because of payment integrations, new partners that we have to do releases to enable those integrations, right? So releases have to be frequent, and of course, there are blackout dates. Now, blackout dates are very important, and for this, let me tell you a little bit more about the product, right? The product was a freemium model product. What it means, it's not like a Netflix, where you have to have a subscription in order to use the product. It's a freemium product. That means anyone can use the product and see most of the content, but with ads. They will get to see ads. If you are a premium user, that means a subscribed user, you will not see ads, right? And of course, when you are a premium user, there'll be payment channels established with it, right? Auto pay, renew, whatever might be there. And there'll be aspects of moving from free account to your paid account as well. Now, what happens is, depending on the regions, based on user study done, based on patterns seen after the product is out in the market as well, business realized that there are certain times of the month where it is extremely risky to do a release of the app or make any changes in the app or backend for that matter. Why? Because that's the payday time. When people get money, they are going to renew their subscription. And they've seen those patterns happening, right? So that's why it's a very concrete data that they had. What it meant is about 3-4 days before the payday is when people would realize, oh, I have some spare money, let me renew my subscription. Or when I get the pay, I'm going to pay off all my bills and then I'm also going to renew subscription, right? So almost 8 to 10 days of the month are blocked off based on this. Now that is one big factor to say, I want to do frequent releases, but 10 days are gone out of my release cycle. So how do I plan for that? Okay? So bear that in mind. The other aspect is analytics is as crucial as functionality, core functionality to business. Why? Because it's a freemium model, a lot of revenue is being generated based on the number of ads served. Ad impressions, ad completed, these are video ads or static image ads, right? Different types of ads. And also that these ads can be configured differently, whether one ad, multiple ads, everything is configurable based on each region configuration. And we have seen in the past, some ads by some providers in particular regions causes the player to freeze because the ad freezes, it's not the player freezing. So a lot of different challenges, and in all of this aspect, the only way to understand if how many ads have been served or not for this product's business is to look at analytics data. Why? Because Facebook might say we served X million ads to your users, and based on that, here's the revenue. However, if it was X plus Y number of ads that were served, that means I should get more revenue, right? So it's directly tied to the revenue aspect as well. So its analytics is not just to understand user behavior, but also as a revenue generation model, right? A revenue model. And if that data is lost for whatever reason, we have lost the money, which is big thing. So testing analytics where there are more than hundreds of events for different combinations, that has to be very important to be tested and working well at all times. Sometimes it might be okay for certain functionality not to be working, but analytics has to work. Strange it may sound, okay? And partner integrations and payments, of course, that is very critical. There would be offers. If I'm coming from a Vodafone network, I automatically get a particular offer. However, if I'm coming from a Geo network, I get a different type of offer. Certain handsets might have one type of offer versus the other. So we have to really understand what the functionality is, check analytics for that, as well as test these partner integrations. Now again, that might work well for India if I'm sitting in India and testing for these networks. But what about networks or partner integrations, payment gateway integrations? for other countries, other regions, right? How do we really manage that? So it's a simple app, but unnecessarily made complex due to these criteria that are there. Okay? Now, because of these non-negotiable criteria, it was very easy for hell to break loose for the engineering team, caused by the business team. Okay? That's why I'm glad there are not too many business folks in this audience right now. I'm going to share some of these things. There are so many testing aspects that were there in place. It made it slow and inefficient. A lot of work had to be repeated manually. You had to simulate various different conditions because you were not there in different regions, different situations to really verify certain things, right? So testing became slow and inefficient, but also mainly because the code base was of very poor quality. There was very limited visibility or control. If I'm making a change in place A, somewhere downstream, an impact would be seen and no one understands that. And that's a big problem. There is very limited test automation. Test automation is not just functional automation. Unit, integration, API testing, and end-to-end testing. Very limited. So that was a big challenge as well. So that prevented us from moving forward faster, right? The business metrics, analytics testing was a big nightmare because again, code was not architected in a certain way that we could rely on, yes, if this functionality is working well, the event for it will automatically be working well. And there are unit tests for it. That was not really the case. So that put more efforts and pressure on the testing team to make sure everything is working fine, okay? And how do we manage releases or issues based on the blackout dates? Because remember the way apps, native apps release works, right? Play Store console is one. From there you can say this app is applicable for which regions or which countries. You cannot say this app is for this country, this app is for the other country. If you do that, then they are separate apps itself. So the app cannot be fragmented into based on different countries or regions that is there. So you have to manage the releases for different regions based on blackout dates, which different regions again might have in a separate way. So very different approach. So you understand what the context, the criteria is, why it made a nightmare working on this type of app from a testing and release perspective? Yes? So I quickly want to now share what we did. Before I share what we did from a testing and release perspective, how do you think you would have managed this situation? Any thoughts how you would have tested this or managed releases for this? Write more functional automation tests? Okay, so just to repeat, we'll write more functional automated tests to ensure functionality at least is tested correctly, right? But that's a big risk, isn't it? The test automation pyramid, you write more functional tests, it's going to become even slower to do that, right? So you have to find ways to focus on building a unit test, an integration test, an API test as thorough as possible and keep the functionality as less as possible. But unfortunately, that's the thing, one of the things that we started doing because the devs were not writing too many unit tests for various reasons. Anything else? Sorry? Try to reduce the constraints. In what way? Yeah. Yeah. So a very good thought in that sense, right? Try to see if we can reduce the constraints. Are these really true constraints or artificially imposed constraints, right? In some cases, you'll be able to negotiate certain leeway around that, right? And again, that's what we ended up doing in certain aspects. So we'll talk about that in the release strategy, what we did around that, right? How we reduce some of that aspect. Okay, so the first thing that I did is established a little bit more structured way of working. Didn't call it agile or anything, it does not matter. But put some order to chaos. How do we manage that? One of the things that used to happen, because it was a small engineering team, we in fact had, if I look at it in retrospect, we had more stakeholders than the number of engineers on the team. Because there were so many regions, each region had their own business team. Then there was a product engineer, stakeholders, product team, and everyone that were there, right? So a lot of stakeholders and a lot of chaos around that. But that created a problem. So set up some relevant practices and processes in place to see how we can streamline some aspects out of how requirements are coming in, how we are able to deliver towards those. Okay? Established and enforced the definition of done. What does it mean for a story? What does it mean for a feature? And what does it mean for a release? And that was again very important to say, we cannot release if certain of these criteria are not met, because that is going to cause an impact downstream, and we cannot have those impact in production. Okay? So no ad hoc implementation of business stakeholders passing on the requirements under the covers to developer and saying, can you implement this one small feature for me, right? No way, we are not going to be doing that. The other thing that we did is thought of various different ways how we could start testing early, okay? So this is not an agile talk, right? But I'm going to talk about some of the things that we did over here, which helped us move in that direction of getting early visibility into what is being done. And first thing that we did was a feature kickoff. Get everyone on the same page, have the product owner, the business stakeholder if required, and the relevant engineers, devs, QAs in the room, and talk about what is this feature, what is the impact, and what is really expected out of it. Did that. We in fact did that at a story level as well. We know the big picture, what does it mean from a building block perspective, and let's have a quick kickoff for that and make sure we are not over-engineering and overbuilding things or missing out on certain important aspects of what each independent story needs to be doing. Okay? We did dev box testing. Before the devs say that I'm done and I'm going to pick up another story, QA, dev, and maybe the product owner comes together, does a quick sanity of the story on the dev machine itself, and then move on. Now again, we are talking about native apps, right? The code is already in Git. The APK is already built and tests are running against it. Doesn't matter. We'll still go to the dev machine, take that artifact, and do testing. Look at the story, do testing for that, and make sure before the dev changes context if everything seems fine or not. Because automation is lacking significantly, right, at all different levels. So we have to put in that thought process, manual set of eyes on that, and explore the app and figure out if everything is fine. Okay? Thorough story testing and a lot of effort on exploratory testing. It's not just about the story, but how does it work for the app as a whole. So we had to spend a lot of time in that, and we did that. That caught a lot of issues early on, pass the feedback back to the devs, and get them fixed immediately. That's the reason we did not file any defects. No defects. This is something that the story is not complete. We found issues in the story, fix it, otherwise the story is not complete. Okay, that was one of the criteria of definition of done. Everything about a story should be complete. Okay, and the product owner has to get more involved and do sign-offs per story and per feature as well. So they cannot say that, okay, I'll look at it after you are done. No, you have to be involved on a day-to-day basis to make sure we are doing the right thing, because we want to reduce the rework that might come up as a result. Okay. Also, we did a lot of intelligent and optimized non-automated testing. So there was so much volume of stories and features coming across the place from all over the place, Android, iOS, web, MWeb as well, that we had to think about, yes, I have to test each story, but can I test it in a more optimized way to say, let me pick up 3 stories together, test it individually, as well as a whole they form a feature and test it at one time itself, instead of doing that in separate cycles. So we did a lot of that aspect. We focused on exploratory testing. We did a lot of sanity testing in-house, as well as we engaged with partners, testing service partners who offer on-field testing solutions. Engaged with them, gave them a specific set of test scenarios to be executed, and got on-field testing done from each different region perspective, which also potentially included the network criteria that was there. And payment activities that needed to happen, we tested those as well. But that way we got more confidence from an on-field perspective, because just we could not travel there, or it did not make sense for engineers from Pune to travel over there every time. We did not miss out on those aspects. Okay. Also, we leveraged the business stakeholders sitting in each region to say, okay, here's a build. Can you do a quick sanity and tell me if everything looks fine for you? So we involved business in the testing aspects as well, which you can call it like a UAT. We just did not get into the traditional terminology what UAT regression is. We just said, no, we want you to also sign off on this. if everything is fine or not. You have to take equal ownership before the release goes out. Okay? But because everything was not automated, we had eventually started creating a checklist of sorts. What are the things that we need to do as a manual sanity before we say this build is good to go? So all story testing is done, whatever forms of automation could be done has been executed, and results have been looked at, actions been taken based on the results. We still had a set of activities, we call it test cases, scenarios, or other activities, does not matter, to make sure before I say this build can be uploaded to Play Store or App Store, is everything fine for this? And that list eventually kept getting longer and longer based on the kind of escalations and things that started coming in, because it was very difficult to sort of try and overcome or reduce the constraints that business had put on us. So we tried to say that, okay, fine, blackout period, we don't want to have a release at that time, but can we do a 1% release for a short period of time and get feedback from that and maybe stop that 1% release over there, right? So we are reducing the risk to the complete user base, but that 1% user base has got the virus with it. The virus could be a healthy virus or it could be a damaging virus. We've still managed to do that release. But we've reduced the impact for 99% of our users purely based on that aspect. And this 99%, 100% is based on who get the upgrade itself, right? The new version. Otherwise, the rest of the people, they continue having that. The other aspect is, of course, automate as much as you can. We tried to push a lot for unit tests. In fact, the criteria was during the story kickoff, this story needs unit testing. And if during DevBox testing, if during testing, we do not see unit tests in the code commits that have gone through, we say we are not going to pick up the story till you write unit tests and then give it to us. So unit testing became very important. We tried to push a lot for integration testing. API tests also we tried to write a lot. And the functional testing, whatever we did, we focused not based on just view testing. I pull up, install the app, launch it and test specific scenario or test case. No. The only functional testing we wrote were end-to-end scenarios, thinking about what our users are really going to be doing, what is the journey that they are going through, and automate as many of that based on the prioritization of those journeys as well. We want to, again, focus on the 80-20. What is maximum set of users doing and try to automate that. That will give us more value for the money. Along with that, we implemented a lot of analytics tests. So from functional testing, we managed to find ways how do we validate analytics events as well, based on the user journeys that we have executed. And we implemented that as part of our CI, which gave a lot of assurance to the team and to business as well, a lot of confidence to say, yes, this will, our core business metrics are going to be met as a result of these changes. Okay? Now with all this focus on automation, the value is if you keep on running it over and over again, right? That's the value of automation. And that's where CI/CD really helps, where any code change, which could be in the app, which created a build automatically after running the unit tests that were there, or any API changes that happened, run those unit tests, API tests that are there, and then you deploy it in a particular test environment, automation environment that we called it. Or if any test code change that we did, everything ensured that we run our functional automation tests. Because as you correctly said, right, write more automation tests. That's what we ended up doing. Any code change from the app build, APIs, or the test code resulted in these tests running. And for that, we created a special lab, on-premise device lab, which we called Mad Lab, but that's a separate topic altogether. But we set up that lab with more than 20, 30 devices, Android, iOS combined, set up various different CI jobs, set up TTA over there to understand trend analysis for the results that were there. And these devices were literally running tests 24/7 because code changes could be coming in at any point in time. We also built an infrastructure over here to simulate different network conditions or other different regions, because there was a capability in the app that we made the developers put in to simulate different network conditions. Based on those network conditions, it would tell the device, oh, I'm in Indonesia, I'm in Dubai, or I'm in any other region. And accordingly, the app would start serving content based on that, serving ads also based on that. So as a result, with those configuration changes that we had, the tests were running pretty much 24/7. The devices used to keep running. And over the course of 1 year, 2 devices actually had their batteries explode because of it, because they were constantly going on. But that was still a smaller problem to have, then compared to the feedback that was very important for us. Okay? Getting to the release side of it, right? This was all about testing and testing early and how automation can add value in this. From the release perspective, I mentioned the on-field sanity, which was very important. We could do on-field, we set up on-field sanity on demand basis. Based on certain types of releases, maybe it required each region to do their on-field testing. So we established that. Give a set of test cases to that team who had no business knowledge or product knowledge, right? They're independent people who are working for this at an hourly rate potentially. We give them a set of test cases on which device I want you to execute and give the report to us. So on-field sanity we did. We did staged releases. For those who you don't know, Play Store has a great functionality of doing staged releases. You create a new build and build version and code number, upload your APK, get it approved, and you can release it starting from 1% in increments of full numbers, of course, whole numbers. You can go up to 100%. So potentially, if you put it at 10%, 10 users coming, 10 out of 100 users coming in an hour to Play Store who are eligible for an update, auto update, or who come looking for an update, 10 out of those 100 will get the update. It is not staged based on which region you are coming in, as I mentioned earlier. But that stage releases is very, very helpful to say, if I release it at a particular point in time, I know there's good volume of users coming from a particular region at some time. Let me do a 1% release at that time, and I'll get good volume of data for that 2 hours, and I can stop the release at that point in time, right? So that data is very important to how you get it. In App Store for Apple, also has stage releases, but you cannot control at what rate you want to increase. Automatically, you can start off on a stage release, and within 7 days, it will take the release from 0 or 1% to 100%. You can pause it if you see any problem in between, but if you forget to look at data, what is coming in from that new release that you have sent out, by the time you look at it, it's already at 100%, and you cannot roll it back. So advantage of stage releases, you can stop it, you can take it off the market, off the App Store, Play Store, and users will still fall back to the last 100%. So stage release is a very powerful way of doing releases and reducing risk. Extensive monitoring of stage releases was something that we did, literally to the extent of saying that last release that we did from 0 to 5%, we did at what day, what time, what was the impact in terms of our analytics numbers. We had complex business charts and technical focus charts to look at that data and compare it with the new stage release and try and do an apple-to-apple comparison. Have I impacted my user in any particular way? And that was very important to look at. We also, the analytics helped. The crash analytics reports for apps, both apps helped a lot. And also we used to keep monitoring our review comments from Play Store, App Store, because it's very easy to get data from users. They will not call in or send an email, but they'll put in a nasty comment over there if something is not working. So you proactively have to start looking at that aspect. And also social media for the same reason, right? They'll complain over there more than going to Play Store, App Store and putting a review over there. So we looked at that as well. And also talk to the support team, country support team, because users potentially call them also and try to figure out if everything is fine. Okay? So I hope that gives a perspective of what different things can be done in terms of testing and release strategy. In an ideal case, there are a lot of things I would not do over here, like a pre-release sanity. If we focus on the right type of testing and testing early, focus on right levels of automation, lot of unit tests and few functional tests, right? In that ratio of sorts. With good practices, good collaboration, it can make it easy. But the problem was a bit too complex over here. So many more stakeholders than the number of engineers than what we are actually producing as output. It was putting too much strain on the team. So we had to fall back and take some few steps back, but try to reduce the risk for our users and for our business. Okay? So with that, I'm actually done sharing with what we did for this type of product from a testing and release perspective. And thank you for this opportunity. Again, hope you got some value out of this. Thank you.